You feel it first as a kind of dimming inside you, a slow extinguishing of a lamp you once tended with all the devotion of a guardian who believed that love could be kept alive by sheer effort alone. And now, after the betrayal, you sit within yourself and wonder how a flame that once felt eternal could vanish without even a farewell glow. You ask yourself, almost in a whisper, if everything you offered, everything you endured, everything you forgave, had been nothing more than a long misreading of the human heart. And this question, this soft, trembling question, becomes the threshold into a deeper night than any you have walked before. You notice that your mind reaches back again and again, searching for the moment where the thread snapped, but the thread did not snap in one day. It frayed over long seasons of giving more than you had, offering warmth to someone who could not truly receive it, explaining away what your instinct already recognized as coldness. You told yourself that patience was love, that sacrifice was virtue, that if you simply remained gentle enough, devoted enough, luminous enough, the other would finally meet you with the same sincerity you carried so faithfully. And now, in the silence after betrayal, you feel something inside, you collapse under the weight of this impossible hope. You feel used, perhaps as if your very capacity for empathy had been harvested, drained, until you stood empty, bewildered, holding the remnants of a promise that was never truly mutual. And yet, even now, you blame yourself. You think, if only I had been more understanding, more patient, more forgiving. The old ego speaks in this way, trying to preserve its identity as the one who holds everything together, the one who redeems the brokenness of others, the one whose worth depends on self-erasure. But betrayal has a curious function in the psyche. It exposes the lie that the ego has built its kingdom upon. And so you sit in the ashes of the old meaning, and you feel the exhaustion that comes when every strategy has failed, when tears have already run their course, when even lament feels too heavy to lift. This is not merely sorrow, it is the ego's recognition that its way of loving, its way of orienting itself to the world, has reached its natural end. And though it feels cruel, though it feels like abandonment from both the outer world and the inner one, a deeper truth stirs beneath this devastation. For in the language of the soul, endings are never merely endings. They are initiations into another order of being. Perhaps you sense this only faintly, like a presence at the edge of your awareness, something watching the collapse without panic, without hurry, without judgment. This quiet witness is the self, the deeper center of your being, the one who has always known that the persona you wore could not carry you into the next stage of your life. But the ego, in its innocence, believed that devotion alone could save the bond, that if you just held on long enough, the beloved would awaken, would reciprocate, would finally see you, and so betrayal becomes not the cruelty of fate, but the necessary breaking of a pattern that could never yield the wholeness you sought, Take a breath now, slowly. Allow it to sink down into the heaviness in your chest and observe how even in this weariness, something still moves, something still breathes. The psyche does not abandon you. It simply refuses to let you remain where you no longer belong. You might remember moments, small, subtle, when your intuition whispered that something was amiss. Perhaps there were long silences filled with explanations you gave to yourself, averted gazes you interpreted with compassion, disappointments you absorbed without complaint. You did what empaths often do. You made excuses for the other person in the name of love. You replaced their absence with your devotion. You mistook your longing for a prophecy of transformation. And now, in hindsight, in this dimming of the inner lamp, you perceive how much of your suffering came from the refusal to speak honestly to yourself. Yes, there is grief here, but beneath the grief is a deeper ache, the sense of having betrayed yourself long before anyone else did. You realize slowly, painfully, that you abandoned your own truth to preserve an illusion. You believed that if you just loved more fiercely, the story would have a different ending. This is why betrayal pierces so deeply. It confronts you not only with the other's failure, but with your own surrender of instinct, your own silencing of inner wisdom. Now, let your breath fall even lower, as though descending into some hidden chamber within you, and notice the hollowness that fills your abdomen. This emptiness is not a punishment. It is a clearing. It is the place where the old scaffolding of your identity has been stripped away, where the weary ego kneels in the rubble, unsure of how to continue. And yet, this is the beginning of individuation, not the mystical bliss imagined by the untested, but the stark, uncompromising path walked by souls who have lost the world they built inside themselves. You may feel as though a part of you has died, and in a sense, it has. The one who believed in unconditional availability, the one who offered warmth as currency, the one who hoped that love could heal what the other refused to face, that one can no longer lead your life. You cannot return to her. She has given everything she had to give, and this moment, this bleakness, this stillness is the first honest step toward a life not defined by self-sacrifice. I remember a woman who once sat before me and whispered, "I feel as if I have died, but my body does not know it yet." She spoke of the same night you find yourself in now, the night when the soul withdraws from its old attachments and waits for some sign of what will come next. She dreamed of a house with all its windows shattered, wind pouring through empty rooms, a hearth cold and dark. The dream did not condemn her, it simply revealed what had already happened within. Her inner dwelling could no longer protect her, it had served its purpose. A new structure was required. You, too, may dream of broken places, flooded corridors, extinguished candles. These images arise not to frighten you, but to signify transition. They tell you that you stand on the threshold of a new configuration of the psyche, but first, the old structure must fall silent. The betrayal was the final blow, but the collapse had been long in the making. There is a moment after devastation when the soul ceases to ask for explanations. You stop replaying scenes, stop rewriting dialogues, stop arguing with the past. A profound tiredness settles over you, and something in you yields. This yielding is sacred, for only when you relinquish the illusion of control, control over the other, control over outcomes, control over how you are seen, does the deeper movement of the psyche begin to unfold. And now, in this strange quiet, you sense an invitation, not from the world outside you, but from within. The self whispers with a gentleness that is almost imperceptible, "Come home." And though you may not yet understand what home means, you feel a faint warmth in the darkness, as if embers beneath ash have begun to glow. Let yourself breathe into that glow, very softly, like tending a fragile flame. Do not demand meaning. Do not demand closure. Simply remain present with the truth that the life you lived before is no longer viable. This is not failure, it is evolution. The empath who once shaped her identity through giving, through dissolving boundaries, through carrying the burdens of others, has reached the end of her role in that ancient drama. You are not meant to be the vessel for another's unhealed hunger. Your soul did not come into this world to be drained, and yet your suffering has not been meaningless. For through the long years of offering, forgiving, enduring, you cultivated a depth of feeling that now becomes the raw material for transformation. Empathy becomes wisdom only when it passes through fire. Look again at the inner landscape before you. Once it felt like a wasteland, but linger a moment longer and you begin to perceive its contours differently. The emptiness is spacious. The darkness is calm. There is no accusation here, no shaming voice demanding that you fix, repair, resurrect. There's only the steady presence of your own being waiting for you to recognize it. The betrayal you endured was not the end of your story. It was the dismantling of a story that could no longer sustain your growth. The one who hurt you served as an unwitting messenger of your next chapter. They revealed the truth of your longing, the depth of your illusions, the fragile scaffolding of your ego's self-concept. And now, with that scaffolding gone, you are free to encounter yourself without distortion. Take another breath, deeper this time, and notice how the air moves differently through you now, as if your body were slowly becoming aware of its own boundaries you once allowed others to cross. Do not hurry this recognition. It unfolds organically, like night deepening into its richest hue. You are not trying to rebuild the ego. You are witnessing its dissolution. The sacred moment when the persona falls silent and the true center of your being stirs beneath the rubble. Yes, there is fear. The fear of letting go of the identity that kept you safe. The fear of entering a night without landmarks. But stay with me here. Stay with the breath and feel how even fear softens when it is not resisted. You are not being asked to leap. You are being asked to remain present with what is real within you, even if it feels unbearably fragile. In this stillness, a realization begins to emerge, faint as moonlight on a distant lake. You start to understand that the darkness you fear is not hostile, it is protective. It encloses you so that something within may germinate in its own time. The ego imagines darkness as punishment. The soul knows it as womb. Allow yourself now to rest in that womb-like night. Do not force clarity. Do not force healing. Simply acknowledge that the life you had constructed has dissolved, and that dissolution is the first act of renewal. Something has ended, yes, but something else, something older, deeper, truer is preparing to rise. Stay with that sense, that almost imperceptible shift beneath the sorrow, as though the silence itself were breathing with you, waiting for you to recognize that you are not alone within it. And as you remain in that quietness, something long hidden begins to rise from the depths, not with violence, not with demand, but with a slow, ancient movement of a truth that has waited for years for you to finally grow tired enough to hear it. It comes first as a discomfort, a subtle tightening in the chest, then as a faint image just behind the threshold of waking consciousness. You sense it before you see it, the presence of something in you that you have tried not to acknowledge. The shadow, not as a monstrous force, but as the exiled part of your own soul. You may notice it in the way sudden anger flares inside you now. Anger that shocks you with its clarity, its precision, its refusal to be dismissed. Or perhaps it appears as envy, resentment, impulses you once condemned as unworthy of the good self you tried so hard to maintain. These emotions rise now because they can no longer remain buried. They belong to you. They are parts of your vitality, parts that were sacrificed in your long devotion to keeping the peace, soothing the world, preserving bonds that were built on imbalance. Do not recoil from them. Breathe instead, gently, as though you were opening a door. The shadow steps forward only when the ego is weary enough to stop defending its illusions. After betrayal, your ego has no strength left to resist truth. And so the shadow emerges with a strange tenderness, as though relieved to finally be seen. You begin to understand that the one who hurt you did not only mirror their own darkness, they mirrored your unlived one. The traits you despised in them, coldness, selfishness, manipulation, evasiveness, were not foreign intruders. They were qualities you had disowned in yourself, thrust into the hidden corners of your psyche. Now they stand before you, asking not for obedience but for recognition. Let your breath soften again and feel how the body trembles when truth approaches. It is not weakness, it is the trembling of a soul that senses the dismantling of an ancient wall. Perhaps in these days you have been dreaming more vividly dreams that disturb you, dreams that unsettle the story you have told yourself about who you are. You may dream of a faceless figure pursuing you, or of striking someone in rage, or of standing before a mirror that shows not your familiar face, but a stranger's staring back. These images are invitations, not threats. They are the psyche's way of saying, look here, this too is you. If then I recall another woman who dreamed she was strangling a figure in a dark corridor, only to find, as the dream ripened, that the figure transformed into her own childhood self. The dream shocked her, but it revealed with uncompromising clarity that she had long suppressed the anger she felt toward the one who had neglected her. That anger had no place to go. It lived in the shadow until the dream opened the door. Your dreams now may reveal similar truths. Memories you brushed aside, emotions you minimized, desires you never allowed yourself to feel. And in the quiet, after betrayal, these inner revelations intensify. For the psyche knows that the collapse of the persona has created the necessary space for deeper work. Stay with the breath, slow, steady, as though you were descending further into the chambers of your own being. Somewhere in those depths lies the mother complex, a pattern far older than any relationship in your adult life. Do not confuse it with blame or accusation. The psyche speaks in archetypes, not in moral judgments, but within you exists an ancient imprint of what it means to be nurtured, to be held, to be protected, to be seen. And for many empaths, this imprint bears wounds that remain untouched for decades. You may find that the face of the beloved who betrayed you begins to blur in your mind, and behind it you glimpse another face, or perhaps a door that never opened, or a pair of eyes that were present but unreachable. The mother complex often appears not as a single person, but as a pattern, the child circling around, longing, the child offering more, giving more, hoping more, believing that if she becomes good enough, quiet enough, indispensable enough, the door of love will finally open. This pattern repeats in adulthood with eerie precision. You choose those who echo the original wound, individuals who cannot receive you, or who feed on your devotion, or who remain emotionally distant while expecting your loyalty. You return to them not because you are naive, but because the unhealed archetype pulls you toward reenactment. The psyche repeats the wound in hopes that this time, with this person, the story will finally end differently. But betrayal breaks the pattern open. It disrupts the repetition. It strips away the illusion that this person's love could heal what began long before they entered your life. And so now, in this quiet, after the collapse, the mother complex rises like an ancient figure from the depths, not to accuse you, but to ask you to see how long you have been trying to redeem a wound that was never your responsibility to bear. Let your breath travel downward again into the abdomen, into the pelvis, into the place where the body stores its earliest memories. Notice how the muscles tighten, then soften, as though acknowledging something forgotten. You may feel sorrow here, sorrow that flows without narrative, sorrow that does not belong solely to the recent betrayal, but to a lifetime of carrying an archetypal burden. Allow it, allow the ache, allow the trembling, allow the body to speak in its ancient tongue. You might sense the shadow here too, not only as anger or repressed desire, but as strength you have exiled. Strength you feared might make you unlovable. You pushed away your boundaries, your assertiveness, your self-protection, imagining them to be flaws when in truth they were your guardians. Now they return from exile, asking to be integrated, not as weapons, but as vital aspects of your wholeness. And deeper still, beneath the shadow and the wounded archetype, lies the mandala. Yes, perhaps you have glimpsed it in your dreams in recent nights, a circle, a pattern, a symbol of order forming in the darkness. The mandala appears when the psyche seeks to restore balance after fragmentation. It is the self calling you towards the center, away from the scattered, outer-directed life you have lived for so long in dreams. It may appear as a wheel, a round pool of water, a golden disk, a circular room, even the sun rising at the horizon. These are not random images. They are maps. If you have seen such a circle, even for a moment, breathe into it now. Let it expand quietly in your inner vision, not as something you must understand, but as something that understands you. The mandala does not promise comfort, it promises orientation. It tells you that the chaos you feel is not the end, but the necessary loosening of the old order. The center that once guided your life, the center built on pleasing, saving, enduring, has dissolved. A new center stirs beneath it, and the mandala is its first whisper. Let yourself linger with that whisper, without grasping, without interpreting, just feeling its gravity. You may also notice now how certain patterns come into stark clarity. You begin to see the repetition across your years, how you chose partners who needed healing rather than partners who chose you, how you silenced your instincts to maintain harmony, how you apologized for things that were not yours to carry, how you equated worth with usefulness, how you gave and gave until your soul stood, trembling in emptiness. These realizations are painful, yet they are revelations, not condemnations. They arise because you are ready to step out of the archetypal loop. You are ready to witness your life with unfiltered eyes. Take another slow breath. Let it fall deeply, deeper than before, into the place where truth is no longer frightening, only necessary. Perhaps now memories appear with new contours, moments from early life you dismissed as unimportant, glances that felt cold, affection that came with conditions, silence that lasted too long, burdens you took on to keep the peace. The mother complex emerges through these memories, revealing how the child learned to become indispensable, to earn belonging by self-neglect, to trade authenticity for stability. And you see now how the adult empath repeated these strategies in relationships, believing they were virtues, never realizing they were remnants of a wound. Do not judge yourself. Breathe again softly. Let the breath comfort the places within you that fear exposure. As the shadow and the archetype grow clearer, something else happens. Your anger begins to purify. Not the wild, explosive anger of the wounded ego, but the sober, lucid anger of truth. This anger does not lash out, it illuminates. It tells you where your boundaries were violated and where you violated your own boundaries. It shows you what you tolerated in the name of love and what your soul will no longer permit. This anger is sacred. It is the fire that melts the chains you placed upon yourself. Perhaps you notice now that the betrayal, though devastating, has become a catalyst. It is the force that shattered the illusion of self-sacrifice. It is the mirror that revealed the cost of living without the fullness of your own presence. And in recognizing this, you begin to feel a subtle shift, as though an inner weight you have carried for decades is beginning to loosen. Let the breath move again, slow, unforced, as though it were clearing a path for the next truth to arrive. The truth is this: you cannot heal the mother complex by reenacting it. You cannot heal the wound by choosing the same pattern and hoping this time it will redeem itself. Healing begins only when you stand still, when you stop pursuing, when you stop offering yourself as compensation for another's emptiness, when you allow the shadow to stand beside you, neither feared nor worshipped. You may feel, in this moment, a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the years spent in repetition, relief that the repetition has been exposed. This recognition is not yet freedom, but it is the beginning of freedom. It marks the point where unconscious pattern becomes conscious choice. Stay with that awareness, breathe into it, let it settle into your bones. And now something shifts again. A new image rises from the depths, perhaps in the form of a circle swelling with light, or of a doorway opening in a dark corridor, or of a child sitting patiently at the foot of a great tree, waiting for you to notice her. This image is the psyche guiding you toward deeper integration. It is not dramatic. It does not shout. It simply waits because it knows you are near the threshold of a profound inner transition. Let the breath accompany you as you approach that threshold, slowly, without haste, without fear. For everything that rises now, shadow, archetype, memory, anger, sorrow is rising to be held, not to harm you. These are fragments of your own life returning home, and in their returning, you feel, for the first time, a glimmer of strength that does not come from pleasing, performing, or saving, a strength that rises from the authenticity you buried long ago, from the parts of you that have waited patiently in the dark and are now ready to step into the dim, emerging light. And as these fragments of your life gather around you, something within begins to loosen even more, a subtle tearing at the seams of the identity you have carried for so long. Not a violent ripping, more like threads quietly surrendering their hold, one by one, until the fabric of the old ego hangs in your hands like a garment that no longer fits the body that is slowly awakening underneath. You sense it first not as liberation, but as disorientation, as though the person you believed yourself to be is dissolving, fading, returning to some deeper source. You may find yourself reaching for the old reflexes, explaining, soothing, apologizing, offering emotional labor without being asked. But these gestures now feel strangely hollow. They do not rise organically from your being anymore. They feel like echoes, like the ghost movements of an identity that has already died. The role of the rescuer, the caretaker, the emotional interpreter of everyone else's storms. This role no longer holds the authority it once had over your soul. And when you try to revive it to be the one who understands, the one who absorbs, the one who makes peace, you feel an unexpected resistance inside you, a quiet but firm no that rises from a depth you did not know existed. This resistance is not anger. It is not rebellion. It is the beginning of truth. It is the self saying, enough. Let your breath rest in that word. Enough. Let it settle into your bones. Let it resonate in every place within you that has been bent under the weight of others' suffering. For years, perhaps decades, you carried not only your own sorrow, but the sorrow of those around you. Believing this to be love, you shaped yourself into the vessel that could hold what others refused to face. You stood in the line of fire to spare them from their own wounds. You offered your empathy as currency, hoping it might purchase safety, belonging, reciprocity. But now, as the light of illusion fades, you see the cost. You see how the old ego survived by being indispensable, by being the one who carries what others drop, by being the one who heals the wounds that do not belong to you. And in this revelation, the ego begins to die, not because it is punished, but because it has completed its purpose. It cannot lead you into the life that calls from within. Let the breath go deeper, down into the abdomen, lower still, as though dissolving into the earth of your own being. There may be grief here. The death of ego is not triumphant, it is tender and raw. Like laying to rest a companion who once protected you, you may feel the ache of releasing the version of yourself that survived so much. The one who believed love required sacrifice. The one who found meaning in tending to others' brokenness. You do not need to judge her. You can thank her gently for carrying you as far as she could. And as you do, you may see a strange image forming within the ego as ashes, not debris, not garbage, not failure, but ashes soft and pale, as though reduced to their most essential substance, ashes left after a fire that burned silently for years, ashes that drift easily when touched by breath, ashes that await the next movement of the psyche. Let that image expand, let it fill your inner vision. You stand, if only symbolically, before the remains of the identity you once called I. And while you may long to gather those ashes, to rebuild the familiar form, some deeper wisdom in you knows that rebirth never arises from reconstructing the old. It arises from the surrender of what no longer has life. Now breathe again, softly, slowly, and notice how the body responds when the old role releases its grip. Perhaps you feel lighter, perhaps you feel emptier. Both sensations are part of the same transformation. The emptiness is spaciousness, the clearing of inner ground. And from this ground, something begins to stir. You may see it as a faint glow, a warmth beneath the ashes, a subtle pulse of red gold light diffusing upward. This is not imagination, it is the psyche speaking in the language of symbols. The mandala forms here in the heart of dissolution, as a circle of fire and earth combined, a red gold wheel, or a blooming disk, or a sun rising within the ruins of the ego's collapsed kingdom. The mandala is the self, gathering its energy again, not in grand display, but in quiet emergence. Let the breath touch that image as though fanning a delicate ember. You may see the ash begin to shift, forming gentle patterns around the mandala's glow, as if recognizing the new order that seeks to emerge. The center is returning, the self is reclaiming the seat once occupied by a frightened ego that tried to hold the world together through self-sacrifice. Stay with this image. Do not hurry it. Do not interpret it too quickly. Symbols reveal their meaning only when given space. And now, from a deeper layer of the psyche, another figure emerges. The mother, not the personal mother. Though her face may flicker in your memory, but the archetypal mother, the great formative presence from which all patterns of nurturing and deprivation arise. She appears not in judgment, but in a solemn clarity, as though witnessing the moment when her long-burdened daughter sets down an inheritance she carried far too long. You may see her standing at the edge of this inner landscape, watching as you lower the weight you once mistook for your duty, ancestral sorrow, unspoken expectations, emotional labor that spanned generations. For so many women, this burden is invisible yet relentless. The belief that you must carry what was never healed before you, that your value lies in your capacity to absorb, endure, and mend. But now, in the dim, sacred light of inner transformation, you set it down. Let your breath soften as you imagine placing those burdens upon the earth, letting them sink into the soil, letting them decompose in their own time. The archetypal mother watches, and something in her softens too. For she carries wounds as well, wounds of the lineage, wounds of deprivation, wounds of patriarchal expectation, wounds of unspoken longing. When you release the burden, you do not betray her, you liberate her. You allow the line of women before you to finally rest. Now you may see her step closer, not to reclaim what you set down, but to bless the act of surrender. She knows, as the self knows, that your life cannot unfold under the weight of inherited sorrow. She knows that the ego, shaped by generations of sacrifice, must dissolve for the true center to rise. And the mandala glows brighter, red deepening into gold, gold shimmering into a quiet radiance, radiance forming a circle so steady it seems to pulse with your own heartbeat. Breathe into that pulse gently, as though syncing your breath with the center itself. At this point, the old reflexes may resist. The ego may whisper, "Who am I if I am not the one who holds everything?" But notice how faint that voice has become, how fragile, how it drifts like smoke rising from the ashes It is no longer the ruler of your inner world. It is a memory of survival, not a blueprint for your future. Let it dissolve gently, without force, as though fading into the twilight of a story that has reached its end. You may now feel a different quality of silence inside you, not the silence of abandonment, but the silence of spaciousness, a silence that holds potential, a silence in which your own presence becomes tangible for the first time. You are not scrambling to maintain harmony, not bracing yourself to absorb another storm, not straining to interpret the emotional weather of those around you. You stand internally in a clearing, and in this clearing, something else appears. A young feminine figure, perhaps a child or a maiden, seated near the mandala's glow. She is not fragile, she is essential. She is the part of you that existed before the world taught you to perform for love. The part untouched by duty, by exhaustion, by the compulsive drive to rescue. She looks at you with a calm, steady gaze, as though expecting you to finally remember her. Let the breath meet her gaze. Let it sink into the chest, then lower as though bowing inward. This figure does not ask for anything. She waits. She has always waited for the ego to relinquish its frantic role, for the rescuing self to lay down its endless labor, for you to stop running toward the suffering of others and turn, finally, toward your own center. And now the archetypal mother steps back, creating space for you and this inner feminine presence to recognize each other. The moment is quiet, tender, solemn. It marks the transition from a life of external orientation to one of inner orientation. You are no longer orbiting around the wounds of others. You are standing at the threshold of your own becoming. Breath now, slow, deep, as though preparing for a truth long withheld. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that nothing in you is required to justify itself anymore. You do not need to earn your right to rest. You do not need to prove your value by carrying another's emotional weight. You do not need to interpret silence, soothe volatility, or shape yourself into a balm for wounds that refuse to heal. These tasks belong to the ego that has died. In the spaciousness left behind, the mandala's glow intensifies again, and you sense a gathering of energies around it. Not chaotic, not overwhelming, but purposeful, as though the psyche, freed from the constraints of old identity, begins to reorganize itself. Outer events cannot dictate this movement. It is an inner law, a shift in gravity, a slow turning of the soul toward its own axis. Allow yourself to feel that turning, gentle, deliberate, inevitable. And as you stand in the clearing, with ashes beneath your feet and the mandala rising in luminous quiet, you sense that something profound is approaching, not as a storm, not as revelation, but as a subtle, sure emergence from within, an emergence that will transform the center from which your life flows, an emergence that awaits only your stillness to fully reveal itself. And as you stand before that quiet inner horizon, you feel a movement so subtle you might mistake it for your own breathing, yet older, deeper, more certain than any breath you have ever taken. It is the self rising, not in triumph, not in spectacle, but in the way dawn rises. Inevitable, gentle, unhurried. You do not command it. You do not shape it. You simply feel it, like the first warmth after a long winter night. You are not the same one who entered this darkness. Something has shifted so profoundly that even your thoughts seem to move with a different rhythm. The old urgency, the longing to be needed, to interpret every silence, to step into pain before it is named, has fallen away like leaves releasing themselves from a tree that no longer needs to cling to what has completed its season. You do not force this release. It happens because the soul has chosen a new direction. Let your breath rest here, in this widening space, this inner clearing where nothing is demanded of you. And notice how the silence no longer feels empty. It feels inhabited, filled by a presence that is unmistakably your own. There is a warmth gathering beneath your ribs, not a blazing fire, but a quiet radiance, like embers that have chosen their moment to glow more steadily. This warmth does not come from the world, it rises from the center, from the mandala that now stands whole within you. You may not see its full shape, but you sense its symmetry, its calm, its authority, and with this sensing comes a profound peace, one that does not depend on any person's approval, any relationship's stability, any promise of return. It is peace that arises when the soul withdraws its projections from the world and gathers its energies home. Feel that gathering now, slow, steady, and notice how your breath seems to flow differently, as though it were drawn from a deeper well. You no longer search for yourself in the eyes of others. You no longer measure your worth by how much pain you can absorb. You no longer offer yourself as sanctuary for storms that are not yours. These bindings were burned in the fire of dissolution. What remains is essence uncompromised, unperformed, unburdened. Perhaps an image comes to you now, the ash-covered ground where the old ego fell away, and from that ground rises a small, golden shoot, delicate yet unbreakable. Or you may see the mandala itself expanding from its red gold center, sending soft pulses through the inner field of your awareness. Or maybe you feel, rather than see, an alignment taking place, the inner axis of your being settling into its rightful place after years of twisting itself to accommodate the wounds of others. Whatever form it takes, let the breath accompany it as though your very inhalation were an act of consecration. You may sense now the presence of the inner child, again the maiden who waited through years of sacrifice, years of confusion, years of abandoning yourself for the sake of belonging. She steps forward, not timidly, but with a quiet certainty. Something in her recognizes this new state, this restoration of inner ground, and she raises her eyes to meet yours. And in her gaze, you see the truth you had forgotten. You were never meant to save others at the cost of losing yourself. You were never asked to carry the lineage's sorrow as proof of your goodness. You were never meant to live as a vessel emptied for others to fill with their demands. Your task was always different, subtler, deeper, to return to your center, to align with the self, to allow the inner light to lead rather than the wounded ego. Let that recognition settle gently, like snowflakes landing on still water. Now, the archetypal mother steps forward once more, not in the form of burden, but of blessing. You sense her as presence rather than person, a vast, holding field that acknowledges your transition from unconscious service to conscious being. She places no obligation upon you. She does not ask you to resume the old pattern. Instead, she bows softly, silently, as though honoring the moment when a daughter lays down what generations could not release. You feel her blessing not as emotion but as clarity, a clarity that whispers, you are free now, free to belong to yourself first. And with that whisper, her presence withdraws like a tide returning to its source, leaving you standing in a quietness that feels both ancient and entirely new. Breathe here deeply, without effort, as though the breath were breathing you for the first time. Perhaps the silence feels warm against your skin, familiar, a homecoming. You do not feel watched or judged or weighed. You feel held by something vast and loving within you. The self does not shout, it does not instruct, it simply is, and in its being, you are allowed to rest. Rest, yes, even that word feels different now. Rest is no longer collapse or surrender or exhaustion. Rest is alignment. Rest is the meeting of breath with center. Rest is the recognition that you do not have to prove anything, not to the world, not to the past, not to the patterns that once shaped your life. Let your breath soften again, as though bowing inward to this truth. You may sense the mandala drawing its circle around you, not as confinement, but as completion, a sacred boundary, a sphere of wholeness, where once your empathy spilled outward uncontrollably, seeking to fill the void in others, it now gathers inward, becoming luminous, contained, sovereign. This is not withdrawal, it is reclamation. The light within you strengthens, not as brilliance, but as steadiness. You feel anchored, rooted, the old instability born from rescuing, performing, anticipating has dissolved. A new stability arises from the center outward. Perhaps you feel it in the spine, the subtle straightening, the way the heart feels less burdened, the way the shoulders drop without command. The body knows before the mind does. The body recognizes the self the way the earth recognizes spring. Your breath deepens spontaneously, as though expanding into space that once was closed. And in that expansion, you sense another truth emerging. You do not fear aloneness anymore. The ache that once drove you into imbalanced attachments has quieted. You no longer seek yourself in the emotional storms of others. You no longer abandon your inner ground to gain proximity to someone who cannot meet you. You know now, without argument, that you are whole. Stay with that knowing. Let it ripple slowly through your being, like calm water returning to a still lake. As you rest in this inner clarity, you may feel gratitude arising, not for the betrayal, but for the way it forced open the gates of transformation. Without the collapse of the old ego, without the death of the rescuer identity, without the fire that burned away your illusions, this mandala could not have formed. You could not have returned home. Home, yes, that is the feeling now. Not a place, not a relationship, not a role, but a state of being, a resonance between the inner and outer worlds, a belonging that does not depend on another's gaze, a warmth that is self-generated. Let this warmth grow slowly, as though spreading from the center of the mandala outward, filling the chest, the belly, the spine, the limbs, the field around your body. You are not imagining this. You are sensing the energy of the self, reclaiming its rightful domain. There is an ease here you have not known for years, perhaps for decades, an ease that says, you may rest now, you may trust now, you may be now. The compulsion to do, to fix, to prove, to rescue falls away. The self leads not through effort, but through presence. Your breathing softens, your inner landscape brightens, and for a moment, you feel the circle of the mandala shimmering as though alive, red at its edges, gold at its center, pulsing with a rhythm that feels both ancient and intimately your own. And now, as the circle steadies, you feel yourself standing fully within it, no longer outside your life, no longer lost in someone else's storm, no longer fragmented by the demands of others' wounds. You stand in the center, whole, quiet, real. Stay here, breathe, feel the weightlessness of being exactly where you are meant to be. There is nothing left to carry, nothing left to apologize for, nothing left to fix. What remains is presence, warm, steady, grounded. The mandala pulses once more, a final soft glow, and you sense that the journey has reached its natural closure. The self does not vanish. It does not withdraw. It simply settles like a flame that has found its perfect wick, its perfect air, its perfect quiet. And in that quiet, you hear the last whisper of this long inner pilgrimage. And now the circle is complete. The mandala has closed gently. You may slowly open your eyes when you feel ready, or stay here in the warmth of the self a little longer. I am with you, always in always, the silence that now holds everything.